everyone, and welcome to Attentive Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to be presenting NextGen PM tools for managing unapplieds, deposits, refunds, and credit balances. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for Attentive. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention this webinar will be recorded, and that we'll save a copy of the slides along with the recording and send that out to you within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with Attentive, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in NextGen healthcare, and our goal in life is to make delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their NextGen software investment. We're passionate about providing solutions for healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything NextGen. And we also have a couple of NextGen add-on products, productivity solutions, including a couple that we're going to cover today, along with ChartGuard, which creates PDF copies of your patient charts. Next, I wanted to mention an upcoming educational webinar that we'll be presenting tomorrow on locking down your NextGen system from the inside out. In this educational webinar, we'll focus on ways to lock down practice data by patient, encounter, templates, and even document types in NextGen. We'll also demonstrate how to lock down your system and restrict access without creating separate practices within your NextGen environment. Our goal is to make sure that you are aware of the external threats and how to take action to lock down your system internally, focusing on NextGen specific ways to limit access to help protect your practice, patients, and remote employees safe from data breaches. If you're interested in signing up for that, you can head to the Events and Education page on our website or drop a note in the GoToWebinar chat box, and I'd be happy to get you set up for that. Okay, so back to today's presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you may type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Tom Seco is Attentive's Business Development Manager and Subject Matter Expert on the products, and Joe Schultz is Director of Product Solutions at Attentive, which means that he and his team are the people that actually built these great programs and thus is in a great position to demonstrate it. So Tom, I'm going to pass it off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar today to talk about the NextGen PM tools for managing the unapplieds, managing deposits, managing refunds, managing copays, and credit balances. Here's the agenda of what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover two areas related to practice management, and that is the credit balances and refunds using Refund Manager, and covering deposits, copays, and unapplieds using the Unapplied Deposit Manager software. There are two tools that enable you to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of managing these areas within your practice. The next thing after we go through the presentation, what I'm going to do is take you through a couple slides, give you an overview of each of the products and how they relate, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe Schultz, and Joe's going to take you through the demonstration of the two products. At the end, I'll come back on and I'll give you another overview of who Attentive is, a little more detail. And then, as Chelsea mentioned, we can answer any questions that you have as well. So to begin with Refund Manager. Refund Manager was a product that was created about 14 years ago, and it grew out of requests from our clients asking us to help them improve the credit process and refund process within the organization. It started out as a credit processor, and then it grew into more robustness through the feedback that we've gotten from our clients over the years, and has now become a credit balance processor as well as a refund check processor. It really streamlines and automates the process of handling credit balances on patient accounts. We looked at the process from start to finish and looked for ways that we could apply technology to that process to increase efficiency and eliminate data entry. And we were able to do that at certain points. One of those points is when we integrate with your accounting application. So we can bring the refund check information over to your accounting application, and you no longer have to do that data entry. You'll see in the in the demonstration, other areas that we have added technology to the process. Refund Manager also is multi-practice aware, so for those organizations, your organizations that have multiple practices set up at NextGen, it allows you to look at an account across the various practices as well. When you look at the process of handling credit balances on patient accounts and issuing refunds, you see that it affects a couple different areas. One, the billing area, two, the accounting area, and then three, a data entry process at the back end as well. What Refund Manager does is it automates those spots within, on this particular slide, you see the gray boxes. It automates those tasks in the process and adds technology to that process. When you have a credit balance on your patient account, you'll probably process it in one or two different ways. One way would be a patient calls up and says, I have a credit on my account and I'd like to have a refund issued to me. So in that, you would say that's a reactive manner. And the other way is what I call proactive manner, and that is if you go on a regular process once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, you're going through and processing the credit balances on your patient accounts. Whether it's a reactive manner or a proactive manner, you're going to look at the encounter details, you're going to look at the transaction details, you're going to look at the account details and determine what to do with that credit balance, whether to issue a refund or maybe apply that credit to an encounter that has an open balance on it. If you're going to issue a refund, you're going to get that information over to accounting in some manner. You're going to either do it via word of mouth, you're going to do it on a spreadsheet, you're going to do it on a piece of paper, you're going to do it with a stack of papers dropped on somebody's desk. Somehow it gets over to accounting, and accounting takes that information and enters it into the accounting application. So they're going to enter in the name of the individual that's going to receive the refund check. They're going to enter in the street address, the city, the state, the zip, the amount of the refund, and maybe some other information as well. So there's data entry on that process as well. And then on the back end, once all of those refund checks have been printed, some organizations enter that refund information back into NextGen, and others do not. So they'll enter in the amount of the check, they'll enter in the date of the check, and they'll enter in the check number. And you'll see in the process of the demonstration, you'll see how we've automated these processes. You're going to see in the demonstration 3 modules that make up Refund Manager: the Credit Scout module, the Batch Detective module, and the Importer module. The Credit Scout module is the module that enables you to find the credits on the patient accounts and make a decision on what to do with those credits. So you'll see we've added filters and search mechanisms to make it easier to find the credit balances. The way that we present the information to you on the screen makes it much easier for you to make a decision on what to do with that credit balance and to take action on that credit balance. The Batch Detective module is the module that moves the refund information over into the accounting application. And then the Importer module is the module that moves the printed check information, the check number, the check date, the check amount, and brings that over into NextGen and automates that process. So eliminating data entry on the back end as well. So that's just a high-level overview of what Refund Manager does. And now we'll talk, give you an overview of what the Unapplied Deposit Manager software does. This software was created, well, actually it's been in process for many years. Our clients have, over the years, asked us to develop scripts to handle the unapplied balances on their accounts. And what we've learned is that these credit balances or these unapplied balances get created for many different reasons. And the way that the various practices and health centers wanted to handle those unapplied balances, they had different business rules from organization to organization on to handle it. So what we did over the years is gather all of this knowledge, and about 2 years ago, we decided to take all of that knowledge and put it into a program. And this is what the Unapplied Deposit Manager software, how it came about. So again, it's a product that makes the job easier and increases productivity, much like Refund Manager does. And it helps you to effectively manage your copay related unapplied balances. Also for the organizations, your organizations that take deposit money in advance of services, it allows you to effectively manage that money as well. It works both at the encounter level and the account level. And as I mentioned, because of all of the rules that we have gained knowledge of over the years, we allow you to select from many different combinations of these rules to apply it to your organization. So it really automates quite a bit of the process of handling copays and handling the unapplied balances on your patient accounts. For those of you practices and health centers that have our Refund Manager product, you can have the option to push these unapplied balances into a credit state on the account so that they can be refunded using Refund Manager as well. So what I'm going to do now is going to turn it over to Joe Schultz, and he's going to take you through a demonstration of both of the products.
Great, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate it. I'm going to go in the same order that Tom went in, so we're going to jump into Refund Manager, and that's going to be the longer demonstration, and then we'll jump into the Unapplied and Deposit Manager after that and show you how that fits in. The whole key here is to show you the workflow, show you the productivity points that these tools enable. Refund Manager gets installed into your NextGen environment. It runs alongside your NextGen practice management, and it's smart enough to know which environment your NextGen practice management is pointing at. So if you're pointing at test, it'll launch in test. If you're pointing at production, it'll launch at production, so on and so forth, just to make life easier for you. So you're not having to manage two totally separate sets of logins and set DVs and fun things like that. Tom mentioned the modules of Refund Manager, and we're going to go through those today. And they're represented by a few of these icons up here along the top. We're going to start in the Credit Scout, and that's the tool where we're going to look at the NextGen database to find credits that are sitting out there and make decisions on what we want to do with those credits. Do we want to move them around, what we call a distribution, keep the money in the practice, take those credits and apply them elsewhere where money's owed? Do we want to refund them out because we need to get the money back to the patient or the insurance? Or is something just a complete mess and we want to put it in the work log to handle another day? So that's what the Credit Scout is going to be about, and we'll get into that in a second. That's the NextGen facing side of Refund Manager. After you've processed things in the Credit Scout and you have refunds, which now need to go to your accounting system, we have the batch detective, which will find those batches that have one or more refund transactions and push them into a variety of different accounting systems that we directly support. And we give you files if you want to create your own imports into those accounting systems. The cool thing about this export of the refund transactions to the accounting system is it can still export the transactions you do manually, in addition to the ones that we're going to do through the automated process here in Refund Manager. And then the last piece of Refund Manager we're going to show today is the importer, and that's going to bring your check information back from the accounting system and update your transactions in NextGen with that info so that your people at the front desk and answering the phones have access to that and they can see the check number, check date, check amount. So we're going to pull that back in very quickly and painlessly with just a couple mouse clicks. So let's begin our story here and go to the Credit Scout and look at credits that are sitting out there in NextGen. Now the top of the Credit Scout has some criteria for various searches you can do, and this criteria is the result of working with clients on Refund Manager for 15 years. People came to us and said, hey, can you do this? Can you search by that? Can you slice and dice this way? Those types of things. And one of the great things about Refund Manager is that its development is driven by the client base. So it's not just us at iTentive dreaming up things that may or may not be useful to you. It's the clients, people like yourselves, coming back to us and saying, hey, if you did this or if you could tweak that, those kind of things. And that's how Refund Manager has grown over the last 15 years. So there's ways in Refund Manager if you're searching for a specific person or you just want to limit your list to a, begins with certain letters type thing. So you have ways to target refunds. We have some clients who still work off of reports that come from other sources, and they sit there and go, okay, let's type in the name, find that person, get that refund out here. We also can put in things like encounter numbers or account numbers. So again, if we're working off reports, we can key those in and pull those up quickly and directly. We have the ability to search by date ranges. So if you're maintaining your database and keeping your credits current, or if you're cleaning up old credits and you just want to work it in chunks, so you're not pulling back the entire database, which you're never going to get through in an afternoon, let's make it in, maybe 60-day moving windows, right? So we give you the ability to set the dates that you want to search between and pull up those ranges and just work those ranges. Normally when you're caught up with your refunds and you're in maintenance mode with Refund Manager, you'd probably pick a window that was something like, let's start about 60 days back, so insurances have had time to process everything, and let's go maybe out to 150 days back. So we'll have kind of that window. So you can pick the dates explicitly using the calendar controls, or you can just set the number of days to go ahead and look backwards. Because this is a test database, I'm going to go ahead and open my range much further than you normally would. In a production database, you'd keep those somewhat tighter so you're not searching the whole database. We have the ability to help you find what you're looking for by qualifying the results that come back in the bottom of the screen here. So for moving the money around, we have the distributions, find us cases where we have credits in some places and money owed in other places on the same accounts. If you're doing refunds, let's find any one bucket, patient, COB 1, 2, or 3, where there's a credit, make sure that credit in that one bucket persists across the account. If we want to make it even simpler to decide if we want a refund, let's go ahead and say all the buckets have to be 0 or in a credit in order for us to, see the results down below in the search and process those. So it's kind of like your test taking strategies, right? You go through the test once and do all the easy ones, then you go through the test again and do the next harder ones, and then you spend whatever time was left working the hardest ones, and trying to get those under control. So in addition to the balances, we also look at the transactions to say, did they truly pay more than the charge amount, right? Let's eliminate cases where the adjustments are out of whack, and let's first process the cases where they truly paid more than the charge was. So again, that strategy of doing the lower hanging fruit, the easier ones first, and then moving on from there. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll start with distributions for the demonstration here. Additionally, you can divvy this up by things like, is the credit, due to the person, the third party, or their, credits in both categories. If you're multi-practice, Refund Manager can search across the practices that your user ID has access to. If you're single practice, that's fine too. It works great being single practice. We give you the ability to sort it by location, provider, department. We have central business offices who use it, where certain people are assigned to certain locations or providers. Great way to do it. And then, if you're cleaning up a particular insurance, you can search by financial class and go ahead and pull for those insurances. Appointment skip days is a great feature that was added a few years ago by client request. And the scenario was, hey, if someone's coming in tomorrow, I don't know I want to issue them a refund check today. So you can look at the appointment schedule, and anyone in the search result that has a appointment within the next 7 or 14 or 30 days, don't show them down here in the search results. Okay, because you may want to hold on to that credit balance because you can just apply it against that new visit that's going to happen. So I'm going to use the distribution here like I was talking about and find candidates where we can move money around. So we're going to do a search against our database here and get some results back. Now the results are shown at multiple levels in this grid. That's the results box down here. What we're seeing at this top level is the guarantor over the account, the amount of credit, and information like oldest and newest encounters, charge amounts, and you can sort by any of these columns and move them around if you desire to get the information that you want first. The movement of the credits is patient-based. So let's go ahead and do this one here for Shirley. Now you're like, oh, that's great, that's a $50 credit, but how do I know it's really a credit? How do I find out more about it? Well, you can start by clicking this plus sign here. And what it'll show us underneath is we have the guarantor on top, then which practice has that credit. So again, if you were searching across practices, you get the practice and account. And then which bucket is the credit in? In this case, it's in the patient bucket, so it would go back to the guarantor. And in this case, Shirley is also the guarantor in addition to the patient. And then what encounter and what charges. So you get that information readily available. Now, if you want to see more information about the encounter, you can click on the encounter number, and what you'll see is a screen that looks a lot like the transaction screen on the patient chart. Okay, it's going to show you those charges, adjustments, payments for that particular encounter. If you want to see the charge ledger, you can come down here to the charge level and see the various charges and their balances. All right, in this case, I can see, we have a $50 credit here, and over here we have, $50 owed on the next one. So it's probably going to move it between those. Hang on, clicked further down than I wanted. Let's go back here to Shirley. So I was showing you, click on the charge for the charge ledger, click on the encounter for the encounter transactions like you'd see in the chart. Additionally, you also have the ability to pull up the screens that mimic the financial summary and account summary in NextGen. So we give you various ways to research this, and then when you're done researching it, if you decide, yeah, I want to go ahead and have this money moved, we give you check boxes for doing the distribution, doing the refund, or moving it to the work log, tasking it out. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick distribution. Now by default on your behalf, it's going to create the transactions first to try and move the money within the encounter and then to move it oldest to newest. We can see what it's going to do by doing a distribution preview. And on the left here is where it's pulling the money from. So it's encounter 1212, the SIM, it's got a $50 credit, it's going to subtract the $50, it's going to move it over here. In this case, it's the same encounter, but it's that other charge we were just looking at in the charge ledger. So when we give it the go-ahead, it's going to co-create that transaction on your behalf. Now, sometimes things get a little more complicated. So I'll pick Oscar, which is a slightly different scenario where we have several movements going on. So it's the same encounter that has the credit, and it's a $295 credit that we're going to draw from. And what it's saying here is first it's going to use 236, and it's going to move it from encounter 1213 to 1214 and pay off that whole balance. Then there's a remaining $59, and it's going to move it to encounter 1215 and pay off 59 of the $67 patient balance, because remember, by default, it works oldest to newest. But let's say, for example, you want to direct how the money is going to be used for the distribution. Maybe in this case, you want to pay off 1215 first and just do a partial pay on 1214. So we give you a screen called distribution matching where you actually pair up that left side and right side. So over here would be our list of credits. In this case, there's only one. Over here would be our list of debits. And if we want to pay off the 67 first, instead of partially paying it, we can go ahead, click those, and pair them up, create a match. Now it's reduced this balance, it's reduced this balance, and there's the 236 left. We can go ahead and take the 228 and apply that against there. With Refund Manager, we use the phrase streamline and automate. This is the part where we're streamlining. We're giving you the ability to make the decisions, but to do the actual work, we're giving you checkboxes that'll do the work on your behalf. So we simply right mouse, go ahead and process. These are our transaction codes that are available. In this case, it's going to use that particular one. These are straight out of NextGen, so you can pick, payment or adjustment codes that you normally use for moving the money around. So instead of us going and creating several transactions, it's going to go do that on our behalf, and it just did it that quick. And we'll go into NextGen after we do the refunds and take a look at those. So now let's go ahead and pull some refunds from the system, some credits that are sitting out there that are good candidates for refunding. And similar to before, again, at this top line, we have the guarantor who's getting the refund. We go down to the practice and account and down to who owns the credit, what bucket it's in, and who sits in that bucket. In this case, it's in the patient bucket, and Jennifer's the guarantor. And the encounters, and of course, we can drill past down the encounters to the charges if we care to. We can do all our research that we saw before. We can go ahead and do the financial summary and account summary in NextGen, so we can see what's going on, get a view of the overall account, make our decision. When we decide we want to refund it, again, instead of going and creating those transactions for several different encounters, we simply click the refund checkbox and it'll do it on your behalf. As you work through this list, normally you'd start from the top and work your way down. When you expand a section, the other section collapses to help keep you focused on what you're doing. If you're not sure what the headers are for each of these, and again, what happens is after a while it becomes obvious what they are, but as you're just getting started, you can go ahead and turn the headers on so you can see what they are. Obviously, it looks a little cleaner with the headers off. So I'm going to go ahead and pick several of these that we can send out for refunds just to show you how quick it is just by clicking the refund checkbox. So I've got some here that are going to be for patient balances, some here for insurance balances. This one that's showing up in red has a restricted contact preference. In Refund Manager, as part of the setup, you can go look at the contact preference options in NextGen, and it's just an indicator where if there's something sensitive going on that you may or may not want to send them something in the mail, or you may want to put it in a blank envelope kind of thing to send it home. So if we click on this, it'll just give us a warning letting us know that, but you can still make the decision to go ahead and do the refund. So we have a bunch of these queued up to be refunded. Now, instead of creating all those transactions, we go ahead, right mouse process, we get our processing screen. Here's our transaction codes and 9 refund transactions created in a heartbeat. All right, so all this work we've done is out there in NextGen. In fact, if we want, while we're in here, we can go ahead and push one of these to the work log also if we want to. So we can, let's go ahead and take this one. And then we can pick the task type that we want. Share a credit on encounter. And that'll put it out there. And you can do these all together. You can do work log, refunds, distributions, all at the same time in one swipe. Normally, we just use these filters to go ahead and, find the most obvious cases of each one so we know what we're looking at. So now we have transactions sitting in NextGen that were created through several mouse clicks, put out there, again, on your behalf in a NextGen batch. So we'll go out there and find our batch. and we'll post it. So we'll go ahead and balance the batch out. Again, anything that Refund Manager does is done on your behalf in NextGen. So it follows along the normal NextGen processing. It goes into a batch, the batch gets posted, gets applied to everything. Your reporting still takes place in NextGen because we're just creating NextGen transactions on your behalf in a much faster way. So we'll go ahead and post this, and then what we'll do is we'll jump into one of the distributions where we move the money around, and then we'll follow one of the refunds out to the accounting system and then pulling the check information back. So I'm going to go ahead and click on account, and we'll take this account 290 right above the box here and show you what that transaction looks like. So these are both just created. The net is 0 because it's positive and negative of the same amount that we're moving around. Here's the transactions, 1213 to 1215. If we go ahead and dive on to the encounter, we can see the transaction note was created with the batch it was put in, and then the movement, from this encounter, this sim, to this encounter, this sim. Additionally, Refund Manager also creates encounter notes for you too. And you can set those up by default to be sealed or not sealed, depending on if you want to use them for an audit trail or not. But it just gives you, a way to view how things are being moved around in the process here. So let's go ahead now and we'll follow one of the refunds through. And we'll take one of the ones to Jennifer. And again, similarly, here's the transaction that was created with the proper transaction code. Here's the batch that it was put into. When we pull the information back from the accounting system after the check's been printed, this is going to have your check number, check date, check amount, which I was saying is great for the rest of the office to have, because if someone asks about, has a refund been processed, they can go in there, look at this, and see that information. Similar to the distribution, you also get an encounter note. You'll get another one when it's exported to the accounting system. I'll show you that when we circle back around here in a few minutes after pushing these out to the accounting system. So the distributions we're done with. Those took place solely in NextGen. The refunds we need to get out to the financial system. In this case, we're using QuickBooks, but again, there's about a dozen of them that we directly support, and because we output CSV and XML files, if there's not one that we support today, we can work with you on what would be involved to support it, and we can either take that work on, or if you have accounting experts, they can take that work on. So lots of different options with Refund Manager here. So let's go ahead and jump back over to Refund Manager and look how easy it is to export the information out. I'm reusing an old batch here on my demo system that I just keep resetting. So I'm going to find my batches that contain the refund transactions, and there could be a whole list of them. In this case, we've only got the one. I'm going to pick the ones that I want to export. And instead of sending a report over to accounting for them to start keying it in and spend, an hour entering, 100 refunds, we're going to go ahead, right mouse export, click the export button. And as we're watching right now, it's setting up those demographics and those payments in the accounting system. Some accounting systems we have direct interfaces to where the programs talk to each other through an API. That's what we're doing here. Others, just based on their limitations, we have files that we can pass back and forth, and you just simply import the file into the accounting system and it would set everything up. So it's a few more clicks, but it's still just as simple because you're not having to do all that data entry. So now accounting's happy because we have all that information in the accounting system about the refunds, and they didn't have to devote their time to being data entry clerks. They can get down to the business of reviewing and printing their batches of checks. So I can see here's the refunds that have been sent over. We'll see there's no check number yet. It's all queued up and ready to be printed. So we can say, go ahead and print our batch of checks. We're just going to print these to a dummy file instead of paper so we don't waste paper. We can do our reprints just as normal through the accounting system if check stock gets stuck in the printer. But now we have the check numbers in here. So this just got really easy for the accounting side, right? They didn't have to do any of that data entry. They could go in there, create their check batches, review them, post them, and then get the checks out. Now, equally on the NextGen side, we save you the data entry of pulling these check numbers back from the accounting system into NextGen. How does that happen? Well, using this last module I was talking about earlier, the importer, we can find our batches that have been exported. We can right mouse, say import, and it just updated all those transactions with check numbers in NextGen. So if we go back to NextGen, I haven't refreshed the screen yet. I'm just going to click and click back. We'll see we have the check number, check date, check amount in there for you on your behalf without having to do the data entry on the NextGen side either. So it gives you that full loop of getting the refunds out and bringing the check information back. I mentioned earlier there's a second transaction note or encounter note created when you do the export. And this is the export note, and this one captures the address that was in play at the time because sometimes the refund address can be different than the default address for the patient or the payer. So we'll pick up whichever one was in play at the time it was exported out. So you'll have that documented on the NextGen side too. So that's the walkthrough on Refund Manager. I'm going to switch gears and show you the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. And kind of the important thing to remember is Refund Manager works with line item credits, where Unapplied and Deposit Manager works with unapplied credits. So even though we throw around the term credit, it's important to note Refund Manager line item credits, Unapplied and Deposit Manager works with those unapplied credits that haven't been allocated to a line item yet. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager is set up to really be a batch function. So Refund Manager, you'd roll out to a number of users because we want you to go through and evaluate those credit balances. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager, because of just the nature of unapplied processing and the way things have to be calculated, works overnight typically. You could set it up to run every night or several times a week, and creates batches of unapplied moves that you then come in the next morning, review them, prune them, post them, and take care of your unapplieds. This particular screen we're seeing here is the configuration screen of the rules that that overnight job is going to use. So this normally would only be rolled out to 2 or 3 people, maybe even only one depending on the size of the practice, but it's always good to have backup. So someone would come in here, pick the rules that they want, save them, and then each night the unapplied job would use those rules until someone came in and changed them. And why would someone change them? Well, because maybe initially you're in cleanup mode, and then once you get caught up with that, you're kind of in maintenance mode, keeping those unapplieds allocated as best possible. So if you think about unapplieds in NextGen, you have 2 kinds of unapplieds, right? There's the encounter unapplieds and there's the account unapplieds. So there's some stuff going on in the middle of the screen here, but what I want to do is direct your attention to the upper left box and the upper right box here. The upper left box is your basic rules for the encounter unapplied. And again, we cover the simple things, right? Like if the unapplied amount equals the patient amount, yeah, go ahead and apply it, right? You can even do that in NextGen. But what do we do if the unapplied amount is greater than the patient amount? Well, we can either apply it up to the patient amount and leave the remaining money in the unapplied bucket, or we can unapply it. We can take the unapplied, apply it, and create a credit. So we can over apply it. So you end up now with a line item credit. And as Tom mentioned earlier, line item credits can then be refunded out via Refund Manager. So it gives you some options to do things like that too. And of course, we can take the less than scenario where the remaining unapplied amount is less than the patient amount and still go ahead and apply it if you want. If you don't want to apply it, just turn the checkbox off. Down at the bottom here are some rules about what to do with any remaining unapplied amount on the encounter. Of course, you can always just leave it on the encounter in perpetuity, things like that. We had a number of clients over the years come to us with help handling their copay unapplieds. And the scenario was, well, you know, the insurances weren't always set up right with the right copay schedules, but we know the copay amounts. And it's an 80-20 thing. If you can get the majority of them allocated, we'll prune out the ones we don't want, but at least we're not having to do all that work of creating the transactions. The deleting them out of the batch is easier than having to type them all in and find them. So we have this unapplied equals a specific amount. Go ahead and apply it either up to the patient amount or with a credit. So when you click on one of these, you get a box and it'll remember these values after you use it, where you can put in your common copay amounts. And if it matches one of those, it'll go ahead and apply it if there's a balance, or you can, you know, do it with the credit where it'll force it down to the patient because, you know, that was money they paid. So maybe you want to move it down to the line item and eventually refund it using Refund Manager. So lots of different options available here within the encounter. Now, if you have money left on the encounter, because either A, you didn't do any moves within the encounter, or B, there just weren't balances to move it to, you have the option to either create a task, this bottom one here, where you can say, you know what, someone go ahead and, you know, go look at these, right? We're just going to task them out and someone's going to go handle them manually. You can move them to the account just generically, right? That goes into your general account unapplied bucket, and then from there you can use them on other encounters going forward. But we have this ability to move money to the account and tag it. And this is the deposit component of the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. This is the piece where it'll look at the transaction code that was used to post the money and save it for a future service or charge that's being provided. All right, and there's a mapping of these that you can set up where you can say, take this deposit code, in this case, fertility, and give it a name. So we just free texted this name. Then over here on the right, we take those text values that we have. So we're just kind of matching, right? The tag on the left with anywhere the tag exists on the right, and then apply it to a particular SIM or modality, right? Which is kind of a grouping of SIMs. So you set this up. So depending on how the money is taken in, that'll be how the money is going to be used in the future. So you can have one of these, you can have several of these, and we'll work with you to kind of configure these in your test environment and try out some certain things. But the cool thing is, if you are taking deposits for one or more future procedures, you can then put it in the bucket and not worry about it. When the unapplied script runs each night and it sees those charges happen, it'll go ahead and draw from that money and create those transactions for you on your behalf. So you don't have to have staff going back in and looking for unapplieds and moving it down to the encounters against the charges. This will do that for you automatically. Now, we have some clients that use the deposit functionality exclusively, some that don't use it at all. It really depends on how you operate your practice, the type of procedures, and you know what your need is ultimately in terms of unapplieds. So over here on the right, we have our account unapplied, and again, we can earmark the money that's posted direct to the account without going to an encounter if it's deposit money too. So we have that same kind of tagging check mark that we have down here, up here. And so this is, you know, the earmark it. This is the go ahead and use it. Go ahead and find the encounters with the charges that we're looking for. And if it was one of those where we did that, don't use any of the further rules for that money. because we're just going to keep using the deposit rules, that tagging and earmarking of the money. However, if you're not using those and you just want to keep pushing the unapplieds through the system and get them down to the encounters with balances on them, that's what these other options are for. So we can, look for the first matching patient amount. We can look for the oldest patient amount, then just keep walking forward with the unapplieds until we use it all up. If you go through that and there's still money left, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to push it down to the most recent encounter with a credit? Just kind of continue to stack up those unapplied balances on an existing credit. Again, useful if you're going to refund it out in the future because you only have that one credit on that one encounter to worry about. Or do you want to apply it, on kind of the newest encounter, oldest encounter, those kinds of things. And similarly, you can also create a task. In the middle of the screen is really just options for scoping what we're going to look at. If you have a huge database and this thing could run a long time, you may want to pick a particular date range or provider or location, things like that. So we give you abilities to kind of narrow that down and narrow down, dollar ranges. And, for the account unapplieds, instead of having to search through all your accounts, you can set a maximum. We can make sure that your insurances are zero before we start moving around these unapplied balances, just to make sure everything meshes out. Now, once you've set these parameters, and again, we'll work with you in test to run through some scenarios, and then you can, play with it yourself too in kind of a sandbox mode and test. You can say, you know what, I've got this, I'm going to save, and then the job's going to pick it up and run it nightly. But if you're testing, we can go ahead and run a small batch of these interactively. So it'll run for a maximum of 5 minutes and create the transactions and batches for you in NextGen. So this is just a list down here in the grid of what was put into NextGen. And again, you have your batches that would be available for you to review. And if you're in test mode, if you like what you got, you can post them, try it out. If you don't like it, you can delete the batch altogether, go back to the unapplied, start over. But in production, normally you'd go ahead and save it and let the overnight job do the work. And then you'd come back into NextGen the next morning, find your batches, review them, make sure it's what you want, and then go ahead and post them or, balance them out and submit them to the BBP to be posted later that night. That's the overview of the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. So it's looking at those unapplied credit balances, and do you just want to move them around to various encounter patient balances that are due? Or do you want to use the deposit functionality and kind of save the money based on the transaction code used to originally post the money against future charges? And you can do both of those two at the same time. So it's it does a lot of complex things, but what we've tried to do is simplify the user interface to just picking checkboxes for the rules that you wanted to use. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Tom since we're coming up to the end of our time, so we can go ahead and finish the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. So what we just saw, as Joe mentioned, 2 products that increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your billing staff. The Refund Manager product that enables you to manage the credit balances on patient accounts and issue refund checks, and then the Unapplied Deposit Manager that allows you to effectively manage the copay dollars, your deposit monies, and unapplied dollars as well. So just take 2 minutes and talk about who Itentiv is for those of you who don't know who Itentiv is. We were founded in 2003, and we have 20+ years of experience with NextGen, 40-some employees in the company from coast to coast, mostly which are consultants that travel from practice to practice, health center to health center, working with the organizations to improve workflows, improve business process, improve reporting, help you improve decision making, get the most value out of NextGen as possible. If you take the 2003 into 20 years, they do not add up, and the reason for that is Itentiv started out as the IT department for a medical organization, and back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the business mantra back then was focus on what you do best and outsource the rest, the medical organization was going to outsource the IT group, and the leaders of the IT group said, well, if you want to do that, what we'd like to do is form our own company and provide services back to you. They agreed to do that, and from that point forward, we have worked with over 350 to 400 clients that use NextGen, and we've become a strategic partner with NextGen as well. We generate our revenue through basically 5 or 6 revenue streams, and those revenue streams, as I mentioned, consulting, which is one, and the second is through we have a group of technology folks that can develop and customize templates for NextGen. We also have a group of developers who are in Joe's group that have developed the tools and software products like Refund Manager and Unapplied Deposit Manager software, and as Chelsea mentioned earlier, our ChartGuard software. So they develop our productivity tools and support them. We also have a group of technology folks that can provide IT managed services, which means that we can support your desktops, your laptops, your printers, your local area networks, provide support that way. We also have our own data center, so we can provide hosting services where we can completely host clients in our data center. We can provide support, help desk support as well. And then the last area that we generate our revenue through is being a NextGen partner and authorized reseller as well. The next steps, if as you listen to what we talked about today with regards to Refund Manager and the Unapplied Deposit Manager software, and saw the demonstration of the products, if you would like to have a more in-depth discussion about either product or both of the products, you can contact myself or Joe. Our information is here on the screen. If you would like to have a more in-depth demonstration of either or both of the products, you can get in contact with us as well, and we can schedule some time with you to go through that. So with that, we'll turn it over back to Chelsea, and we can answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you so much, Tom. Joe, thank you for the demo. And again, everybody, thank you for joining us today. If you have questions, you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel. We only have a few, so great time to ask them if you have them, and we're happy to answer them all. So the first one, we need the ability to search by specific payer.
I'll go ahead and run with that one. With Refund Manager as exists today, obviously it's driven by the financial class. However, as I said earlier, the features that are in Refund Manager have been driven by the client base. So if we need to add a search by payer in addition to financial class, that's something we can look at collaborating on in the future.
Great, thank you, Joe. Next question. We run in a hosted Citrix environment. Are we still able to use your product?
The answer is yes. Refund Manager was actually developed to be both Citrix and Workstation compatible. It uses a lot of the same tools and technologies that NextGen itself is written in. So wherever you can run NextGen Practice Management, you can go ahead and run Refund Manager there too.
Perfect, thank you, Joe. And it looks like this might be our last question. We recently upgraded NextGen. Can we still use Unapplied and Deposit Manager? Do you keep them up to date?
Yes, we do. We've spent 15 years with Refund Manager keeping it up to date. In fact, we originally wrote Refund Manager against NextGen PM 3.4. And then when NextGen 5, at the time called Fusion, came out, we moved it over to that. And we've gone ahead and not only kept it working with, but took advantage of kind of some new things that came out over time. Also the same for the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. That was based on a lot of scripts we used to write that we kind of consolidated into one tool where you could pick which parts of those scripts you want to have execute. So that one will keep current also. If you're doing a big NextGen upgrade, we'll work with you to install the products into your test environment so you can go ahead and test everything you're doing, not just your NextGen stuff, but your iTenv tools and add-ons also. So that'll be available. Just, give us a call at our support number and we can arrange for an analyst to work with you in that environment. Normally for hot fixes, things like that, it's not that critical, but anytime you're doing a big NextGen upgrade, you probably want to get these installed in your test environment too, just so you can vet everything out together. We do our own testing internally, but as you know, things in the real world are often different than they are in the lab. So that's why we work with you on the testing on your side too.
Great, thank you, Joe. And it looks like we got one more question that came through. If you are scheduled for an upgrade in 6 months, would you recommend waiting until after the upgrade?
Typically, no. If it's that far out, you could go ahead and get installed with either of both of these today. The installations themselves are pretty quick. We can go ahead and get them installed into your test environment fairly quickly. Unapplied and Deposit Manager, that goes in right away. And like I said, you can start playing with it in sandbox mode in your test environment. Refund Manager, we can get that installed into the test environment quickly. Usually the time with setting up Refund Manager is the accounting integration, and if you have kind of an advanced GL scheme. But, again, if you want to get it loaded, get it in test, start using it, we can get it out there and you can use the Credit Scout, and then over time we can get the interface to the accounting system going. Or, if it's an accounting system like QuickBooks or Great Plains, the two that we see most often, we can normally get those installed fairly quickly. So, my thought would be, why do it the hard way for 6 more months if you don't have to?
Looks like we have a kind of related question, Joe. How much training is required? Excuse me.
For Refund Manager, we provide a training video that you watch and a user guide. We set it up in your test environment, as I've mentioned first, so you can kind of start playing with it. And then when you're ready to go to production, we'll sit down with you and either in the test side or production side, do a walkthrough of the whole process to make sure that everything is being best optimized. For the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, again, it's similar. It's really just a matter of you trying the different rules for your scenarios and getting those rules that cover the majority of your unapplied cases. We'll never get them all, just because there's, always strange things and people are doing when they're posting things into Unapplied. But the key here is to get the productivity by getting the majority of those cases handled through automation, leaving you just to handle the, more advanced ones.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions, but if you have any more questions, you see both Tom and Joe's information up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to either one of them. Otherwise, you can always reply back to the email that I'll be sending out with a link to the slides and recording. Basically, any way you can get a hold of us, we're happy to help. We're happy to answer your questions. So keep thinking about it and let us know if you come up with anything. And thank you again for joining us. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Tom and Joe, thank you very much for presenting. And everybody have a great day.
Thank
I feel
you,
like
everyone.
I've said that a lot.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.